prospect with integrity, we will get customers who have integrity. Integrity is the foundation from which everything is built on.
You better understand value. But at the end of the day, sales is a relationship business. It is a people business. It is an emotional business.
This is Sales Logic.
This is Sales Logic. It is 8 a.m. Saturday morning. I am coming to you from the Student Center at St. Leo College in Tampa, Florida. And it is my favorite time of the week. It is time for a Sales Logic. Mark, what do we have on tap today?
Well, I'm glad you're going back to get your degree. So congratulations.
I need it.
That's right. That's right. Anyway, hey, what we have on tap, we're going to be talking about how to build the right sales process, because you can get caught up in doing a lot of stuff, but is it really going to make a difference? And the lightning round, top 10 ways to invest in your sales education. So let's dive in. How do you build? How do you look at building the right sales process?
You know, Mark, I love this question because I got to tell you, I don't know about your experience, but I talk to so many sales professionals, even organizations that don't have a sales process. You know, they kind of let every single salesperson do their own thing. Now, you know, as a sales professional, when I was coming up, that sounded really sexy to me. And the last thing I wanted was somebody to tell me what to do. But here's the problem with no sales process at all. I mean, I think we need to start there. Why do you even need a sales process? Well, the reason you need a sales process is because you don't know the recipe of how to land the deal. Like, Mark, if I came to work in your business tomorrow, I'm a really great salesperson, but I don't know how to land your customers. And every single company has a different recipe. One of the biggest challenges I see is hiring really great sales professionals, and you don't aim them at the right target. You don't give them the recipe of how to be successful in your business.
Well, there's so much truth in what you said, that because again, it's so easy to be busy. And again, hey, I see this all the time. Everybody's got a different process. And the challenge is there's no focus on really what the customer is. Now, this is the biggest challenge I find. How to build the right price, how to build the right process. So let's start with the product. Let's get all this product knowledge. Let's get all this stuff. And I go, hold on, let's figure out who the customer is. Who is the customer that you're trying to sell to? Then back in and begin to add what is the product knowledge. But when I see organizations building a sales process and they start with product and they just keep dumping product knowledge, I'll tell you what, that is a big turnoff right there. Fast, done, no more.
Yeah. I think the sales process always starts with the target. I like to build a bullseye for my clients. Like, in the middle is the ideal prospect. You know, this is the creme de la creme, the number 10 out of 10. Then the outer rim is, these are the ones that will accept. They make like 6 or 7 out of the 10. But the outer rim, these are the ones you want to stay away from. So I think when you want to build the right sales process, you need to be as clear on who you're focused on, as clear as you are as to who you should not be focused on.
Oh, so much. I love that. And I love Bryn's question here. How detailed should the sales process be in your CRM? I remember I was working with an organization back here a couple years ago. They have an 18-step sales process. Now, I may be off by 1 or 2, but it was long. And as a result, the salespeople spent all of their time in the CRM. Now, that's defaulting to too many. At the same time, I see sales organizations that only have 2 or 3 steps. That leaves too much vagary. Okay, I can make up my own words, right? It just becomes too vague. You've got to create a measuring process that allows everybody to be on the same page. And this means probably 5 or 6 steps. But there's got to be clear definition, because again, the detail is in the notes. Salespeople, you've got to be putting your notes into the CRM system, but make sure you're scoring it properly, that you're not moving somebody through, because sales managers do this, the end of the quarter. It's amazing how everybody is right there on the edge of closing. Not going to happen. Not going to happen.
Yeah.
Got to understand that very carefully.
Yeah, Gina Carr, a fractional CMO, probably nobody more talented at marketing than Gina Carr. It's just really advocating what you're talking about. Who is the customer? Get clarity on that first. So listen, this is how we do it. I mean, I think the very first parts of the sales process, get very clear on who the customer is that you're going after. Then how are you going to qualify that customer? I use a grid. I have 9 qualifiers, and in order for me to continue with that prospect, I have to meet 6 of the 9. So my very first call is qualifying that prospect on 6 to the 9. But Mark, I think one of the biggest things that's really changed with the sales process today is now, once you figure out who the customer is, you don't go straight to calling. You go to marketing, right? I mean, we just had Gina Carr on here talking about marketing, but you have to ask yourself, where does this customer go to get information? Where does this prospect looking for information on the products and resources they want? And what are you doing from a marketing perspective to get in front of them?
And that's so true because they are getting their information from multiple sources and they also have multiple people. The idea being that, hey, there's only one contact that you need to reach. Wrong. Andy Greenberg is checking in today with us from Poland. He's normally in Florida. Great. Love that you're having a great time somewhere in Europe, wandering around Europe. That's great. This is what I'm going to come back to this whole piece. Do we really understand what it is that we want to help our customer achieve? So in other words, it comes back because you did this, you do this, I do this. You qualify the customer. Are they truly a prospect versus a suspect? But then what is the potential solution? Because when you identify who the prospect is, you can begin to identify this is the product or service that they are going to best be served by. Because again, that's what I got to understand. But I can't do that until I understand what the need is that the customer has. And is there any level of urgency and budget to be able for them to solve that?
Yeah. So I think the most important thing about at the beginning of the sales process is you've identified who the client is, but then you have to really focus heavily on getting in front of them before you ever make a sales call. Because in today's marketplace, how the sales process has changed is the customer has to have heard of you and about you. I mean, Terry Brock is weighing in here and saying, we have to get tightly focused on who we serve and how we can help them. Like Mark was saying, it's just that simple. This show isn't about developing the sales process. It's about developing the right sales process.
Oh, I love what you're saying there because again, we're tying in marketing to this, and this is so key because I've said this a lot. Your reputation arrives before you do. Nobody goes to a restaurant without talking to some friends or understanding Yelp reviews or Google or whatever it might be. Is this restaurant worth it? And this is so key that it's absolutely fundamental. The other piece that marketing does, this is a little bit of a side note, it increases your referrals because it now makes you much easier to refer. Somebody says, hey, they had a great experience with you. Hey, you know what? You need to hire Meridith, Elliott, Powell. Just go to our website. Just go to this, go to that. And you become easier. So you're right. You've got to bring the two together. When we talk about building the right sales process, it is much more than just what do I have to say? What do I have to ask? What do I have to do in the process itself to the entire experience that the customer, because this is the whole thing. It's not about your experience. It's about the customer's experience.
Yeah, so here we are. We're at the top of this funnel. We've got the right prospect we're aimed at. We're qualifying them on that first call. I think so often on the first call, we're just praying they do business with us. That should not be your mindset. What you're trying to do on the first call is to figure out if this would be the right prospect for you. Because the moment you say yes to a prospect, you're saying no to 10 other prospects. In other words, and if you choose the wrong prospect, you've just said no to customers who could pay you, who could do lots of business with you, and you've said yes to somebody who's going to be a pain in your backside. Speaking for a friend, I've heard that's true. So once you go through that process and you actually get through the door, I mean, networking has got to be a part of it. You've got to think like, how am I going to connect with this person? Am I going to do it through LinkedIn? Am I going to go to an industry event? Like, where am I going to make that first casual date with them to start to kind of warm them up? And we've got Terry Brock on here, who is like the genius with technology and AI. In today's marketplace, a lot of that warm up happens via technology, right? Like we don't always meet our prospects in person. I don't know about you, Mark, but I meet very few of my prospects in person.
Oh, that is so true. There's so much there. But this is the key thing that we have to understand what is the right balance. And again, it comes back to, am I busy or am I productive? Which takes us to the question this week. Comes from Leona in Boston, Massachusetts. She says, my team is hitting their goals collectively. Some are overachievers, some are not performing. My boss is all over me. She thinks I need to establish a process for sales, getting everyone to be working on an actual set of behaviors. What do you think? It drives home exactly with what we're talking about. Hey, you've got some underperformers. That's a separate issue, but boy, probably got to get rid of those people.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm getting ready to do a presentation on Wednesday. Wednesday, I'll be in Toronto, and I was just working up some statistics on sales, and sales professionals who analyze their win-loss ratio. In other words, they take the time to really understand why they won a deal, understand why they lost a deal, and consistently make adjustments. They close 67% more sales than their competitors. Think about that. Like they're not selling a better product, they're not selling a cheaper product, they're just taking the time to say, it would be really smart for me to take a breath and really analyze that. So to our question this week, I would say that's really where you need to start. I mean, how can you measure anything if you don't have a process? How can you understand? Like imagine trying to get healthy and you just got up in the morning, exercised when you felt like it, ate when you felt like it, and didn't track anything. You wouldn't know what worked if you lost a pound that week or what derailed if you gained 2. You wouldn't know like what drove your blood pressure up or why your cholesterol got in line. You need to track what you're doing so you can learn from yourself.
That is so key. And I love where you're going with this because, again, you got to be able to identify what are the best practices. I put that question into the brain, the sales logic brain that's available to everybody that's in the mastermind group, and came back with several things, including, identify the best practices and then focus on those key activities. Because again, I think average performers can be busy, but they're chasing the wrong stuff. And that's the thing that top performers do because they analyze their calls and they get very, very tight on what it is that they're doing. And at the end of the day, oh man, what you've got to do as a sales team, make sure everybody is held accountable because those average performers, they're not willing to be held accountable at all.
Yeah, Bryn Tillman is saying when she started in sales, BANT was the process, which stands for budget, authority, need, and timing. What do we think really has replaced BANT? I don't think there's an actual acronym that has replaced it. But I think before you ever start to talk about, do they have the money? Are you talking to the decision maker? Do they actually have a need? And when are they planning to buy? I think you need to ask yourself, like, is the process going? Like, what are you doing to get in front of them? What are you doing to qualify them? What are you doing to make sure that this is the highest and best use of your time and their time? And then the other piece I would add on that is that when BANT was designed, most of us sold inside a community, like I sold down Main Street or something. And now when I sell globally, follow-up is incredibly important, especially in today's marketplace with the decision-making slowing down. You better have a well-defined value-added follow-up system. But Mark, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Oh, I love that Bryn brought that up because I get asked that question a lot. And BANT is still relevant. People, oh, BANT's not relevant. Here's the thing. There are additional pieces that have come into play because you could have a need. I've got a lot of needs, but they're not going to get solved right now because of other priorities. So in other words, it's understanding the strategic priorities of the organization or the individual that you are selling to. That is fundamentally one. The other piece is this. Who are the other competitive players? What are the other, now, and I don't mean competitive players in terms of, oh, I got competition out there, but what are the other options that the customer might have? In other words, the customer has need, fine, but there could be a dozen different ways with which they could solve that need. I've got to be able to understand what those are. So in other words, it's BANT, but I think we now have BANT on steroids. But that comes back to really understanding your process. You've got to be able to break it down very granularly to figure out what it is. And this is why you've got to be focused on just your ideal customers only. Don't chase anything that breathes. Don't chase anything that responds to you. Don't chase anything that will have a conversation with you. Only chase those that fit your absolute tightest profile.
Yeah, I love what Scott is saying here, that saying no to 10 other prospects, it's thinking about what is the highest and best use of our time. So many sales professionals without a process sell from a place of weakness rather than a place of power. And, I'll liken it, because I liken everything to nutrition and working out, because I think it's so easy for us to understand. But like this morning, I'm really pressed for time. I had to be here. I had to leave to come here at 7 a.m. this morning. So I only got to get in a 20-minute workout. I could have gone for a 20-minute run, or I could have lifted weights for 20 minutes. Well, it's a bigger bang for my buck to lift weights for 20 minutes than it is to run for 20 minutes. So it's kind of thinking about, is this prospect worth my time? And if you have any doubts, that's why I grade them and put a grid to them. But Mark, I want to make sure we really flip to the other side of this, because if you've done all those things and had really good conversations, let's talk about what the follow-up process has got to be to get that across the finish line. Because I feel like when I look at people's sales process, they are rock solid at the top, but they are weak at probably the most critical part of the sales process, which is the follow-up.
Well, that's because they're not following up. They're simply not following up. And if they are following up, they're following up with either buy, or look at this product, look at this product, look at this product. The follow up has to be 100% geared towards what is that need? What is the problem? What is the solution that the customer's looking for? And you've got to be able to hone in on that. Now, there's a couple little pieces there that you've got to make sure that you're still focusing in on timing and budget, because again, timing and budget absolutely key, because do they need to solve it now? And do they have the financial resource? So in other words, but again, it's not about buy. You're creating the buy because you're accentuating the need that they have, the problem that they have. That's where your focus has to be.
Yeah, I love what Terry Brock is saying here. This is just wisdom. Make sure you take this from the show. AI helps us today to know what our customers are really looking for. Sentiment analysis is the key. And AI, when used right, can let us know what potential customers really, really want. Oh, Terry, so true. I talk to my AI every morning. I'll say, tell me about this industry. Tell me the details. Now, I verify everything that they do, but it is so, so key. Good morning, Brenda. Thomas, I love this question. Is there really one single process that works for everybody on your team, though? The answer to that is no. But let me clarify that a little bit. If you came to work for me tomorrow, I'm going to require you to use my process. And then you use my process. And if you can make it better, if you can perfect it, and if you're blowing your goals out of the water, I don't care what process you use. But our question this week was about an underperforming team. And the very first place you go with an underperforming team or individual, back to process. And then certainly after that, you can adjust it.
Yeah, because I'm going to make sure that they're following those 5 or 6 steps. Now, again, there's going to be variations in there based on personality, based on geography, based on all these various things. But I'm going to come back and I'm going to hold them accountable to those 5 or 6 steps. Now, if they are still not measuring up, then I'm going to begin to go in and begin to question, what are the questions they're asking? What's the conversation? What's the timing? I'm going to break each one of those steps down. But here's why it's key. Don't try to throw the baby out with the bathwater and redo the entire process. It's probably just one element. It might be in the qualification stage. It might be in the identification of who is the decision maker. It might be in the follow-up. It might be in the close. But I've got to stay absolutely tight in that space, because if I stay tight in that space, then I am good to go in terms of coaching them through. Hey, we are burning time here. We got to get to our book from Jay Butler, Mastering the Sales Process. Why would we not have a book like this as our book?
Right. I think people think that sales processes aren't sexy, and maybe they aren't sexy. But, it's kind of like buying a franchise. Why wouldn't you use the recipe that already works? I mean, if I join a sales organization, is my ego so big that I don't want to be doing exactly what the top professionals do. You know, Tony Robbins has a great quote where he says, success leaves clues. And I think like the sales process is that clue. I gotta chime in here though with what Sharika is saying. I love this mic drop. Great sales don't begin with scripts; they begin with signals. Oh my gosh, I was listening to a podcast this morning that was talking about the most important skill you can have in success is curiosity. And if you're looking for the signals, if you're curious about what the signals are, you are going to do well in sales.
I love that question too, because think about it. You go to a Broadway show, you don't see the performers on stage walking around with a script. Now, they were using script when they were initially doing the table readings, et cetera, et cetera. But by the time that curtain goes up, it's that there is no script. They are making it happen. So it's absolutely key. Great question. Love that process. Okay, are you ready for the lightning round?
I am. I'm just wondering if this LinkedIn user is Sam Richter. What do you think?
Well, I have a feeling it probably is because that would be normally how he would respond. Now, I'm sorry if you don't know Sam Richter. Google Sam Richter. He's a good friend of Mayor and myself. We love the guy dearly. Okay, lightning round. Okay, here we go. Are you ready? I got to find a lightning round question. There it is. Top 10 ways to invest in your sales education. Go.
Set time every single day. Micro learning is everything.
2, get into podcasts and double speed, 2x them all the time.
Yeah. Number 3, find a mentor. Find somebody to study that you really emulate and want to learn to be like them.
And with that, you have to be willing to be accountable. You have to be accountable to those you are going to sit down and learn from.
Yeah. Number 5, I would say, if you want to improve in sales, improve in the other parts of your life. Look to improve your fitness. Look to improve your financial acumen. Look to really understand the industry better. Look beyond just sales steps and sales process.
I'm going to build on that whole accountability piece. You got to be in a mastermind. You've got to be
Yeah.
with people who are going to hold you accountable. That's why we talk about the Sales Logic Mastermind so much, that you need to be part of it.
Yeah, make sure that you make time at least once a year to really invest in going to a conference, somewhere where you're going to be pushed out of your comfort zone and really observe some of the best of the best.
I'm going to say be holistic. When we say holistic, it's not just learning about sales, but learning about life, learning about other things. Learn about what it is that your customers are into. Understand the entire marketplace, the entire framework of business.
Yeah, I think it's important if you're going to invest in your sales education to start reading again. I mean, it's the best stimulation that you can have for your brain, and audio and everything is fabulous, but think about reading again.
And reading is not just reading little short quippets on Twitter or whatever it's called these days. It's long form reading. It's reading books. That's how you're going to do it. Hey, why don't you throw one more out? I'll throw one more out. We'll close it down.
Yeah, I think if you want to invest in your sales education, learn to analyze your own sales wins and losses, like we just talked about. There's probably no better sales coach out there than you, and understanding what you do well and where you need improvement is one of the smartest things you can do.
Set yourself metrics, set yourself goals that you are going to do X amount of reading each week, or you're going to do X amount of this. You're going to make sure that you are absolutely gold. Scott, you're interested in the mastermind. Go out to saleslogicpodcast.com. You'll see the information there. Love to have you join. With that, we want to say thank you for listening to Sales Logic this week. If you like what you hear, subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast app. Something we've said has earned you a single dollar. Consider telling a friend about our show, because it's how we grow when we help you grow. I'm Mark Hunter.
And I'm Meridith Elliott Powell.
Remember, when you sell with confidence and integrity,
all of this uncertainty suddenly becomes your competitive advantage.
And the sale becomes logical.
That is right. All right. We'll see you right back here next week, 8 a.m. Eastern, for another episode of Sales Logic. Please remember that if you want to be a part of the Sales Logic Mastermind, we would love to have you. Go to saleslogicpodcast.com. You'll find the information there. And if you have a question, we'd love to feature you right here on the show. Pop it in there and we will help you close more deals. All right. We'll see you next week.